Welcome back to this series on reading to learn languages. This week, I wanted to talk specifically about reading to learn. So, as we talked about in the other episodes in this series, you got to learn to read before you can read to learn. And we talked about some specific ways this applies to those of us learning another language, right? How to apply basic reading skills, right? How our literacy skills, and just the basics of learning how to read to learning new languages. So I have this example here. I saw this in Paris some years ago, and so this, of course, is the 4-hour work week, which I'm curious how many languages had been translated to. But I don't think that things from our own culture, reading in another language, are necessarily the best. But I think the if you really want to read something and you want to work on your language skills at the same time, it's a great way to sort of combine those two goals. So the takeaway here, even though it's not an access into culture, it's certainly learning something new, right? And nonfiction is a great way to do it. I did a whole lot of work with nonfiction to really get up to a high level in Spanish audiobooks. I'll talk about that. Um, I think I'm going to talk about that this week. So basically, learning things in other languages. I think that there's so many great resources in the public domain. So there's the Gutenberg Library. There's lots of things to read there. But I would also say a good source of gain of growing your knowledge would be Google News. And so you can change your location settings, find Google News from different places, and it's a really great way to read to learn in a new language, right? Once you've kind of got some of the basics down, go ahead and dig a bit deeper into reading to learn. So think about any topic you want to learn more about. It can be cooking, it can be history, it can be mathematics, it can be science, it can be current events, it can be politics. You name it, do your reading in another language. And I wanted to share with you a resource. A few years ago, I had this amazing opportunity. What I didn't know a few years ago is that the Anne Frank House, the foundation, does a lot of work with schools and teachers, unsurprisingly. They do some things that travel all around the world, talking about like a traveling exhibition. And if you go, I was able to spend a weekend there with the education center with some teachers from all over Europe. It was pretty amazing, and I feel really so fortunate to have experienced this. But what I discovered while I was there is they have a great bookstore with tons of publications, all in different languages, and they sell online. So if this is something that you've already read, you know, pick up a copy in another language and reread it. They have not just the diary, they have tons of other publications. And so a really, really, really great way to learn new languages. So with an interconnectedness that we have, a lot of public libraries have a lot of capabilities that they're growing all the time. And so even if they don't have, a physical book there for you, they can oftentimes find an ebook or an audiobook. And we'll talk about an app on how to find that. I know Overdrive does a lot of magazines, but there's so many different databases. So it's a matter of talking to the librarian at your local library about finding reading materials in your language, not just language courses. So my very favorite resource, it's not it's not cheap, but it's absolutely one of my favorites, is Audible. So I have I get a certain number of credits a year and I certainly use them. And what's great about it is it's got audiobooks for beginners as well as lots of things in target languages. So while I pay for it, it's not free. It's definitely worth it. And I'm a really busy person, so I can listen to it on my Alexa, I can listen to it while I clean, I can listen to it while I'm walking in my commute. Makes a huge difference. So not only do they have beginning language courses, they have um, lots of content for, some of the big novels that are translated into many languages, as well as content from other cultures. So one of the things that I did when I had the Target, and this is before I had Audible. I'm not even sure if it existed then. I had a really high Target for Spanish, and I invested heavily in listening to audiobooks, and I would listen to them a couple of times each, and I would listen to them consistently. So, I would say an audiobook, can range from a few hours of playing time to, quite a few, 12, 13. Um, so it's a lot of input. So I would just listen, and I really focused at one point on nonfiction because it was concrete and I would get a lot of practice, a lot of input on some really difficult structures, right? That those structures where people are giving advice. So I highly recommend this. And I'm sure, as I talked about earlier, I know a lot of libraries have access to audiobooks as well. They have in their catalogs, or and they can easily borrow. So another activity to do in reading to learn is, keeping journals of facts from your reading, right? Because it makes it then very active. So if you're still at that point where, you can't sort of read completely fluently, that you need some support, writing down, sort of 10 facts from every chapter you read can really help. But something in your journal or a summary even of what was said or talked about in the book. In the next week, in the last week of this series, we're going to be talking all about reading for pleasure. If you know of any great reading resources, particularly catalogs that people can access online to get content to read in a multitude of languages, drop that in the comments so we can share. Until next time.